My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter as I sat sipping my coffee, lost in the familiar routine of a Friday evening. The message caught my attention because it came from an unknown number. Your wife, Rose, has been cheating on you with Colin for the past year. Thought you should know. I read the message twice, then a third time, as though repetition might somehow alter the words on the screen. My chest tightened, and I could feel my pulse quicken. It had to be a prank, or a mistake. Colin was one of my best friends. Rose was Rose. But the words didn't vanish. They stayed there, staring back at me like a challenge. I sat frozen for a few minutes, my mind racing through a flood of memories. Rose's laughter during late-night get-togethers, Colin's easy jokes as we watched the game together, the way they'd sometimes exchange playful banter. I'd never thought much of it, until now. Could it have been more? The message sender was anonymous, with no identifying name or details. I tried calling the number, but it went straight to voicemail. No name, no greeting, just the automated message telling me to leave one if I dared. I confronted Rose first. She was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her tablet, a glass of red wine beside her. "Hey," I began, trying to sound casual. My voice betrayed me, coming out rougher than I intended. She glanced up. "What's wrong?" "I got a weird text," I said, holding up my phone. "Someone said you're cheating on me. With Colin." For a split second, her expression changed, just a flicker of something unreadable before she quickly shifted to wide-eyed surprise. "What? That's ridiculous," she exclaimed, setting the tablet aside. "Who sent that?" "An unknown number." "Sean, come on." She shook her head, laughing nervously. "You're not seriously giving this any weight, are you? Who even sends something like that? A troll. Someone trying to mess with us." Her reaction was convincing. Almost too convincing. "Why would anyone say that?" I pressed, watching her face carefully. "How should I know? Maybe they hate Colin. Maybe they're jealous. Maybe they're just trying to start drama," she replied, her voice rising. "I can't believe you'd even ask me this." The conversation ended with a frustrated sigh from her and an apologetic one from me. I wanted to believe her. Colin was next. I didn't want to accuse him outright. There was still a chance this was all just some bizarre prank. But when I brought it up, his reaction mirrored Rose's almost too perfectly. Confusion, denial, and frustration. "Sean, you've known me for years," he said, shaking his head. "You really think I'd do something like that? To you, of all people." No. I didn't want to think that. But something gnawed at me, a small voice whispering that maybe I didn't know as much as I thought. I tried to push the message out of my mind, but the damage had already been done. Every interaction with Rose felt different now. Her touch felt colder, her laughter more forced. Every time I saw Colin's name in a group chat or heard his voice on the phone, it annoyed me. That night, as Rose slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling, my thoughts spinning in circles. I wanted to trust her. I wanted to believe that our life wasn't built on lies. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and I could already feel its roots beginning to take hold. At first, nothing seemed unusual. She went about her days as always, smiling when we crossed paths in the kitchen, humming softly while folding laundry. But once the idea of betrayal had wormed its way into my mind, it was like a lens I couldn't take off. I started to notice things I'd never paid attention to before. One morning, as I was grabbing my keys to head to work, I caught her by the front door. She was adjusting her coat, and something about her bare hand caught my eye. "You're not wearing your wedding ring," I said, frowning. She paused, glancing down at her hand like she hadn't noticed. "Oh yeah," she said, waving it off. "I just forgot to put it back on after my shower. You know how it is." Except I didn't know. In all the years we'd been married, Rose had never been one to forget her ring. Even when she was rushing out the door or getting ready in a hurry, it was always there, a small but constant symbol of what we had. "You've been forgetting a lot lately," I said carefully. She gave me a pointed look. Are you seriously making this a thing? It's just a ring, Sean. Don't start. I let it go, but the uneasy feeling didn't. Over the next few weeks, the forgotten ring became a pattern. She'd leave for errands, meetups, and the gym without it more often than not. Each time I asked about it, and each time, her response was the same: forgetfulness, an afterthought. But the excuses didn't line up with who she was. Rose wasn't the kind of person to forget details, especially not something as meaningful as her wedding ring. The realization hit me: she didn't want to appear married. One evening, I couldn't help myself. I brought it up again, more directly this time. You're really forgetting your ring that much? Or is there another reason you're not wearing it? She froze mid-step, her back to me, before turning around with a sharp laugh. What are you even implying, Sean? That I'm taking it off for someone else? The words hung heavy in the air between us. Her tone was defensive, but there was an edge of something else. Nervousness? Anger? Guilt? I don't know, Rose, I replied, meeting her gaze. Am I? She scoffed, shaking her head. I can't believe this. You're still hung up on that stupid message, aren't you? It's been weeks, Sean. Let it go. I can't let it go when everything feels different, I shot back. You're acting strange. You're leaving without your ring, and every time I bring it up, you get defensive instead of just telling me the truth. I am telling you the truth, she snapped. You want to know why I forget it? Because I've been stressed. Because you've been acting weird and distant ever since that damn message. You think I don't notice? Her words stung, but they didn't change the facts. The argument fizzled out with her storming off to the bedroom and me left pacing the living room, my thoughts in a spiral. The tension between us became impossible to ignore. Even when we tried to be normal, it felt forced. Every glance, every conversation was tinged with the weight of unspoken accusations and mistrust. Then, one night, something happened that shattered any illusion I had left. We had decided to spend an evening together, just the two of us. No distractions, no phones, just us. It was supposed to be a way to reconnect, to rebuild what felt like it was crumbling. For a while, it worked. We laughed, we talked, and for a moment, it felt like old times. But when things became more, you know what I mean, I noticed something that froze me in my tracks. Faint, purplish marks on the inside of her thighs. I pulled back, my voice low and tense. What's that? She blinked, her face blank. What's what? Those marks, I said, nodding toward her legs. Her eyes followed mine, and for a second, I saw panic flicker across her face before she quickly masked it with indifference. Oh, those. I don't know. Probably from the gym or something. I was doing leg presses the other day. The explanation was weak. Laughable, even. Rose, I said, my voice firmer now. Leg presses don't leave marks like that. Tell me the truth. She sat up, pulling the blanket around herself like armor. I already told you. I don't know how they got there. Can we not do this right now? You're ruining the night. I'm ruining it. I snapped, standing up. I'm not the one hiding things, Rose. You don't want to talk about the ring. You don't want to talk about the marks. What the hell am I supposed to think? Her voice cracked as she yelled back. You're supposed to trust me. But I didn't. I couldn't. Not anymore. As I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling again, I knew what I had to do. If Rose wouldn't give me answers, I'd find them myself. The morning after our ruined evening, I made the decision to stop relying on Rose for answers. I couldn't live in this limbo anymore, questioning every word, every glance, every touch. If she wouldn't be honest with me, I'd find the truth myself. I spent the day researching private detective agencies, poring over reviews and testimonials until I found one that seemed discreet and reliable. When I called the agency, I was surprised by how matter-of-fact the process was. The woman on the other end asked for basic details: Rose's schedule, her habits, her usual haunts. I provided what I could, my voice feeling detached from my body as I explained. She assured me they'd start immediately and said they'd contact me once they had something concrete. The first few days passed in an unbearable haze of waiting. Rose went about her life as if nothing had happened. She laughed at TV shows, asked about my day, and even suggested we plan a weekend getaway together. It all felt so painfully normal, like she was trying to patch over the cracks with forced cheerfulness. But I couldn't play along. Every time I saw her, my mind replayed the marks, the missing wedding ring, the message that had sparked it all. The call from the detective came a week later. "We've got something," he said, his voice calm but firm. "You'll want to come to the office to see for yourself." Whatever they had, I wasn't ready for it. But I had to know. The detective, a middle-aged man, greeted me with a firm handshake and a sympathetic expression. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. "We've been following your wife as requested," he began, gesturing for me to sit. "What we found confirms your suspicions." He opened a file and slid a series of photos across the desk. The first showed Rose entering a cafe downtown. The second showed her sitting across from a man I didn't recognize. Late 30s, athletic build, a smug grin on his face. The next few photos left no room for interpretation. Rose leaning over the table, her hand brushing his, her smile far too intimate for a simple conversation. But it was the final set of photos that hit me hardest. They were outside a hotel, the two of them walking in, her hand resting on his arm. "You said you wanted the truth. I'm sorry it wasn't better news." I nodded numbly, unable to tear my eyes from the evidence. "There's one more thing," he added, sliding a final photo across the desk. This one showed Rose and Colin, my best friend. She was laughing, her hand on his shoulder. "From what we can tell, the affair with Colin ended. But it seems your wife has moved on to someone new." I drove home in a daze, the weight of the truth pressing down on me like a physical force. The evidence was undeniable now, and yet, a part of me still wished it weren't real. I wanted to scream, cry, break something, but mostly I just felt hollow. That night, I didn't confront Rose. When Rose finally went to bed, I stayed behind, planning my next steps. The next morning, I woke up before Rose, the weight of my plans settling heavily on my chest. I stared at the ceiling for a while, knowing that by the end of the day, everything about my life would change. The first call I made was to the bank. I explained that I wanted to freeze the joint accounts temporarily and requested new accounts in my name only. The customer service representative was polite, though I could sense their curiosity at my urgency. I didn't owe them an explanation, and I didn't offer one. Next, I called the landlord to break our lease. It wasn't ideal, but I'd already decided I couldn't stay in that house. The memories within its walls, the laughter, the fights, the love we'd once shared, were now tainted. The landlord wasn't thrilled but agreed to let us terminate early, provided I covered the fees. It was a price I was more than willing to pay. By the time Rose came downstairs, coffee in hand, I had already packed the essentials and stored the rest in boxes. I didn't want to drag this out any longer than necessary. "Morning," she said, her voice light. "You're up early. What's all this?" I turned to face her, my expression calm but resolute. "We need to talk, Rose." She blinked, her smile fading. "About what?" "About the fact that I know everything." Her face paled, and for a moment, she didn't speak. "What are you talking about?" she said finally, her voice trembling. I reached for the folder on the counter, the one containing the photos, timestamps, and investigators' notes, and slid it toward her. "This. You might want to sit down." Rose hesitated before taking the folder. Her hands shook as she opened it, flipping through the evidence. I watched as her expression shifted from confusion to horror, then to a kind of defeated resignation. "Sean, Don't," I cut her off. "Don't insult me by trying to explain this away. I've heard enough of your lies." Tears welled in her eyes as she closed the folder and set it down. "I never wanted to hurt you," she said softly. "Really?" I laughed bitterly. Because it looks like you put a lot of effort into doing exactly that. Colin wasn't enough, so you had to find someone new? Was that the plan all along, Rose? To see how far you could push me before I finally snapped. It wasn't like that, she said, her voice breaking. Colin was a mistake, and I ended it. You ended it? I interrupted, my voice rising. No, Rose. I ended it the moment I got that text. You just moved on to someone else because you couldn't stand being faithful for more than 5 minutes. She flinched at my words, her tears now streaming freely. Sean, please. I was lost. I didn't know how to tell you that I wasn't happy. So you thought screwing my best friend and then some random guy would fix that? I snapped. Do you have any idea how pathetic that sounds? Her sobs filled the room, but I didn't care. I was done feeling sorry for her. I've already taken care of everything, I continued, my tone cold. The accounts are frozen, the lease is broken, and I'm moving out. I will file for divorce. From now on, any communication will go through my lawyer. And now you live where you want and with whom you want. Her eyes widened in panic. Sean, wait. We can fix this. I'll go to therapy. We can go together. Please, don't throw everything away. I shook my head, my voice firm. You already threw it away, Rose. I'm just cleaning up the mess. I grabbed my keys and walked toward the door, my suitcase in hand. She followed, begging me to stop, but I didn't look back. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. The drive to my new apartment felt surreal. The city streets blurred past me, familiar but distant, as though I were seeing them through someone else's eyes. My phone sat silent on the passenger seat, though I knew it wouldn't stay that way for long. Rose's pleading face, her tear-soaked words, replayed in my mind, but I pushed them aside. She didn't deserve space in my thoughts anymore. When I arrived at the modest one-bedroom apartment, the reality of what I'd done finally hit me. The place was stark and empty, a far cry from the home Rose and I had built together. As I set my suitcase down, the weight of the situation settled squarely on my shoulders. This was my life now. I didn't unpack. Instead, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor as a flood of emotions overwhelmed me. Anger, sadness, betrayal, and, most surprisingly, relief. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of control. That evening, I poured myself a drink and let the memories come. I thought about the early days with Rose, back when everything had felt so effortless. I thought about Colin, my so-called best friend, and all the times he'd been by my side. What stung the most wasn't just the betrayal, it was the lies. The countless moments when Rose and Colin had looked me in the eye and pretended everything was fine. How long had they laughed behind my back, confident I'd never figure it out? How many times had Rose kissed me goodnight after being with someone else? The anger flared hot and fast. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through the photos the investigator had sent, each image a gut punch. The sight of Rose with her new lover was bad enough, but the ones with Colin were the ones that made my blood boil. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to call Colin and tell him exactly what I thought of him. But I didn't. Instead, I deleted his number. It was a small act, but it felt significant. Colin didn't deserve the satisfaction of hearing my anger. He wasn't worth another second of my energy. The days that followed were a strange mix of numbness and clarity. I buried myself in work, avoiding calls and texts from anyone who wasn't a lawyer or a close family member. Rose reached out several times, leaving voicemail after voicemail. Sean, please, can we just talk? I know I messed up, but we can fix this. I love you. I can't believe you're doing this. You're just giving up. Her words were desperate, manipulative, and, ultimately, meaningless. I didn't respond. I forwarded every message to my lawyer and blocked her number. One night, my sister called, her voice gentle but concerned. Sean, I heard about what happened, she said. Are you okay? I'm fine, I replied, though my voice cracked slightly. "No, you're not," she said. "And that's okay. You don't have to pretend." Her words hit harder than I expected. For weeks, I'd been keeping it together, telling myself I was strong, that I didn't need anyone. But in that moment, I let the mask slip. I told her everything: the text, the photos, the confrontation. By the time I finished, my throat was tight, and my eyes burned with unshed tears. "Sean," she said softly, "none of this is your fault. Don't let their choices make you doubt yourself." Her words didn't fix everything, but they were a balm to a wound I hadn't realized was still bleeding. The divorce process was grueling. Rose fought back at first, trying to argue for a larger share of the assets, but the evidence against her made her case weak. My lawyer assured me we'd come out ahead, and he was right. When the settlement was finalized, I felt a strange mix of triumph and sadness. It was over, truly over. The day I officially became a single man again, the world seemed oddly quiet. No more legal battles, no more confrontations, no more voicemails from Rose. It was over, but the weight of it still clung to me. I drove back to my small apartment in silence, letting the enormity of the moment sink in. As I stepped inside, I realized I'd never unpacked the last box I'd brought with me. It sat in the corner, unopened, a reminder of the life I'd left behind. Slowly, I walked over and opened it. Inside were remnants of my marriage: a photo of Rose and me on our wedding day, a dried bouquet from our honeymoon, and an anniversary card she'd written years ago, filled with promises that now felt empty. I stared at those items for a long time before picking up the photo. We looked so happy, so full of hope. I almost didn't recognize the person in the picture. With a heavy sigh, I placed the photo face down on the counter. That night, I went for a long walk. The cool air felt cleansing, a stark contrast to the storm that had raged inside me for weeks. I thought about everything that had happened: the betrayal, the lies, the anger, and I realized I was tired of carrying it. Rose and Colin had taken enough from me. They didn't deserve to take any more. Over the next few weeks, I started rebuilding my life piece by piece. I threw myself into work, taking on new projects that challenged me and gave me purpose. One evening, I joined a group at the gym, a mix of people who met weekly for runs and hikes. It wasn't something I'd ever done before, but I needed a change, something to get me out of my own head. That's where I met Kate. She was different from Rose in every way: straightforward, unpretentious, and fiercely independent. We started as running partners, exchanging casual conversation during our weekly meetups. Over time, those conversations deepened, and I found myself looking forward to our talks as much as the exercise. Kate never pried into my past, but when I finally told her about the divorce, she listened without judgment. "That's a hell of a lot to go through," she said. "But it sounds like you've come out stronger." Her words stuck with me. For the first time, I began to see myself as more than just a man who'd been betrayed. I was someone who had faced a storm and come out the other side, scarred but still standing. The final piece of closure came unexpectedly. Months after the divorce was finalized, I received an email from Colin. "Sean, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but I need to say this. I was wrong, and I'll regret what I did for the rest of my life. I've lost your friendship, and I don't blame you for never wanting to see me again. I'm sorry." I stared at the message for a long time before deleting it. There was nothing left to say. By the time the one-year anniversary of the text that shattered my life rolled around, I barely recognized myself. I was healthier, happier, and more focused than I'd been in years. The scars were still there, but they no longer defined me. One evening, as I sat on the balcony of my apartment, watching the sunset, I realized something important. I'd survived. Rose's betrayal had hurt. Colin's had cut even deeper. But in the end, their actions didn't destroy me. They only proved that I was stronger than I'd ever given myself credit for. As I later learned, the anonymous text message was sent to me by our mutual friend, who is in love with Colin.